Welcome, everyone. My name is Ashit, and I'll be moderating this evening. I am excited to welcome Courtney Roberts, our speaker tonight, for 5 ways top dental practices support their office managers. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to go over some housekeeping. If you have a question, please type it in the box labeled "Have a Question," and we'll answer them live at the end. CE is not available for this webinar, live or on demand. Courtney, welcome. I will pass it over to you.
Oh, thank you. It's always so good to have such a warm, friendly welcome. So I really appreciate that. So I am Courtney Roberts, and I am the Director of Talent Management and Client Onboarding here at eAssist. But most importantly, I work for a fantastic company, eAssist Dental Solutions. And one of the many, many great things about eAssist is they are known for having putting money back in the pockets of our dentists for years. And we have really prided ourselves on making sure that we reduce the stress of the office, and also making sure that we are helping our offices not only through GPs but our DSOs with reliable cash flow. To date, we've collected more than $9.34 billion from our friends over at our insurance companies. And not only are we here to help support dentists all across the country, but we're also here about culture. Culture is something that is so important to us, and hopefully that's seen through some of these fantastic awards that we've been honored to receive. And culture is something that drives who we are and our core values. So it's something that's really close to our heart. So let's go through who we are and what we actually do here at eAssist. I'm sure some of you have heard of us, but I like to kind of explain how we help and service thousands of offices each and every day. And then we'll go to the next leg of our presentation. So we do this through 6 easy ways of outsourcing 6 fantastic things in your practice. And the first one up is our dental insurance and billing aging service. This is our core service, our superstar service. It's kind of like the Girl Scouts with their Thin Mint cookies, even though I'm more of a do-si-do kind of gal. This is our shining star of services. And what this core service is about is, making sure that claims are submitted correctly, that they're paid, and they're accurately posted into your patient's account. We are consistently monitoring and working on your aging reports to keep your balances over 90 days to a minimum, if not at 0. Another service that we outsource is credentialing. And in the ever-changing world of insurance, and that's exactly what it is, ever-changing, this gives you peace of mind knowing that your claims can be processed the first time around accurately, making sure that your providers are credentialed with your carriers and you're having those agreements set up accurately. So this is a fantastic way to give you that peace of mind and that your insurance claims are going to be reimbursed the way that you want them to. And then we have our insurance verification and eligibility service, which is, I think, our dark horse of all of the services. And our offices tell us they can't, imagine not having the service, because, our insurance companies and verifying insurances has become so much of a challenge nowadays, and making sure that you guys have accurate information in your practice. So that way you can quote your patients their financial responsibility, and giving them that trust in your office as well is really important. Then we have our accounting services. And hey, let's be honest, running a dental practice is more than providing dental care to a patient. There's a lot that goes behind the scenes. You have to make sure your bills are paid on time, that your EFTs are deposited into your bank account, and that matches your practice management software, that you're reconciling the right way. Your expenses are tracked, all that good stuff. eAssist will be there to help you do that. And then our patient billing service, which is, I think, my absolute favorite service, if I'm being honest. And that's because, as you guys know, collecting money that is past due from someone is a bit of an art. And we have some great artists over here at eAssist. And with this service, our eAssist teams will make sure that your patients are receiving statements regularly, that they're following up to make sure that their balances are paid. And they do so very elegantly, and they're making sure that your practice is well represented throughout this whole process. And then lastly, our very new service is our full schedule and patient recall and retention. Keeping your schedule full and your patients coming back in is the lifeline of your practice. And eAssist now offers this service that takes care of this for you. So you can focus on the billion other hats that you have to make your practice successful. Now, what we're going to go through today, I'm hoping, is giving your office manager a little bit of clarity through what's important each and every day, and helping her or him master their craft. And there's so much going on in the plate of an office manager these days that sometimes it's hard to stay focused on what's really important throughout your practice and the health and the success of your practice. And I say that, we're hearing more than ever from our clients that our office managers, they just don't have time for things like, like they used to. They're trying to keep up with just a cornucopia of fires, and they sometimes don't have the experience or the understanding of how to make sure that they have the latest and greatest knowledge of the insurances. And I say, most of our from our studies is like 2/3, I believe, of Americans now have privately held insurances. So I absolutely validate, their stress of being piled underneath to-do list and not having all the tools that they can make your practice be successful. So what we're going to go through is a couple tips and tricks and 5 ways that they can stay focused on one of the most important roles that an office manager has, which would be your revenue cycle management. So tips and tricks that they can practice each and every day, so it's the forefront of their responsibilities, making sure that your practice has fantastic, reliable revenue cycle management. Okay, so let's start off with the very first tip, and this is probably my favorite one, would be your morning huddles. I know practices have been doing these for some time, but there's still some that don't. And some of them call them pre-appointment readiness or a practice growth meeting, things like that, whatever you want to call them. As long as they're being done, this is the absolute most, I think, easy tool to implement that can have the greatest results for your practice each and every day. So what's a pre-appointment readiness plan, or I guess a very bougie way to say your morning huddles? Well, it's all about having a moment in your practice that you're dedicating to making sure that your practice runs effectively. The most synergized and successful teams utilize their morning huddles to motivate, to strategize, and to proactively address potential roadblocks to revenue cycle management. This is something that can quickly and immediately maximize the effectiveness and the efficiency of your entire practice. So if you aren't doing morning huddles, then you're in the right place, my friend, and hopefully you gather a few things that help even grow your practice and have more successful meetings. Now, just like all things, the most important things is making sure you have a plan and making sure you're consistent. Our morning huddles should start at the same time. They should be the same place. They start on time, they end on time, about 10 minutes before your first patient is set to arrive. Making sure that you're going through quality information. There's always that saying of paralysis by analysis, and things are overwhelming, or they're not talking, or they're not covering important pieces. So having a quality agenda throughout these morning huddles would be key to making sure that you're set up for success. And, if you don't run the day will run you. And we all know what that looks like. And we all have had experienced those types of days. And these morning huddles will make sure that you are running the day and not the other way. And it's all about, being prepared with these morning huddles. So a couple of things to remember when you're going through your day-to-day is, what do you want your agenda to look like? What's the most important things that you can cover to make sure that your day is set for potential challenges and fires that you may experience throughout the day? So knowing kind of what your experience is the day prior and learning from those is where these morning huddles typically start. So, talk about what went right the day before. Talk about wins, maybe a hygiene win or a business team win, something that people can celebrate, and asking, hey, what are you really proud of? What went fantastically well, yesterday, and whenever we have a win and we feel great about something, no matter how small or big the win is, our brain and our chemistry and all that starts to really go into play, and we feel more confident and focused and smart, and the cortisol levels seem to slowly trick away. So starting the day with a positive note and learning what went well the day before is a great place to start. And then going through each department, identifying potential challenges that could come up and how you're going to handle those challenges. So being proactive versus reactive, and making sure everyone's on the same page. And if there is a potential concern as a team, how we're going to help that department get through that if it actually does come into fruition. Now, going through a snapshot of the day and looking at your numbers and see where you are with your goals. People love to know where they are and how they're performing, and giving them a transparent view of the practice's stats is huge. So, covering things like your net production, your net collection ratio, production per hour, all of that is fantastic. And a good, rule of thumb is, if you're pre-blocked more than 50% of your production goal, then, you're already halfway there, way to go. And so keeping little milestones like that can encourage the team to keep going when sometimes the day may seem like it's going to be an impossible task to get those goals. Of course, going over any patient emergencies, going through new patients, hitting any intraorals that are going to be needed. Intraorals are huge, not only for your insurance claims, but for your patients, for them to understand your treatment, for your insurance or your treatment plan coordinator. They love those as well. So identifying in your schedule, who needs your SRPs, who needs your intraorals, things like that. So the whole team knows exactly what needs to be ready, especially before the doctor comes in. You want to go through who's pending treatment, any potential referrals that you can ask for, making sure that we have patients that are, that are pre-meds, things like that, and going through all those, all the cranks and things like that of the day. And then one of my favorite things to do is going through the end of the day is finishing off on a positive note. And something it's always good to hear from the leader at the end of a meeting and going through a leadership statement from the doctors. And starting your note on a positive note and ending your meeting on a positive note really helps get the day in the right mindset. So, there's plenty of, apps and quotes out there for you guys to use. And even if someone wants to rotate and bringing those, but hearing from your leader at the end of these meetings are always fun. Okay, so tool number 2 is providing access to coding and coding administration tools. So, every year there are changes to the rules that govern dentistry and changes to the actual CDT codes. So not being aware of these changes will inevitably result in delayed or denied claims. So if you want to reinsure timely reimbursement, then it's important to stay up to date on these changes. So, this year alone, the ADA Codes Maintenance Committee made a total of 46 changes to the CDT for 2022. And where do these changes come from? Well, the Code Maintenance Committee meets in Chicago, in case you want to riot there. No, I'm kidding. They meet in Chicago every March to review proposed changes to the CDT code set. And so these changes actually come from people just like you. So if you guys feel like, the committee is missing something, terminology isn't quite right, or something is outdated or should be clarified, you actually can go to the ADA's website and submit a proposed change, as long as it's done by November 1st. So you still have a few days left to get your opinions in, but it will all be discussed at the next meeting the following March. And then just like in medicine, there's the ICD codes and the CPT codes, which is what we see for medical filing. The ICD-10 codes are what we're most used to. They're the diagnostic codes rather than the procedure codes like the CDTs. Now, the ICD-11s have been approved for release January 1st of this year, but it's not actually being implemented here in the US just yet. The timeline of when that code transition will occur, it's the government, so it's still unclear about when that would happen. But there's all sorts of great resources that the ADA has to give you more info with it. So the ADA code really has 2 main publications, which is a list of their current codes and then a list of what they call their companion. The companion is a good publication full of questions and answers and examples about codes, so that's absolutely worth having. And then there's also a resource called Practice Booster. So Practice Booster, or Coding for Confidence, it's a manual with over 500 pages of codes, explanations, do's, don'ts, narratives, examples, coding for specific products, procedures. It's the holy grail for dental coding. It's the most comprehensive coding reference manual on the market. Dr. Charles Blair, he actually produced and he annually updates a book each year for decades. So he's the GOAT when it comes to insurance coding. I know they do have a Practice Booster online version, and they have a digital code advisor as well. So if you don't want to have the old manual book, they have electronic versions as well. And then for those who are submitting medical claims or who want to start submitting medical claims, there's actually a medical coding crossbook through Practice Booster as well, and it references dental and medical codes. So if you're not using your Practice Booster or your Coding for Confidence, please reach out to your field rep and look into those. Those are huge for practice management and understanding what codes to bill. Okay, so going through coding and knowing that it's not only important, but it also is a team effort. It really takes a village to make sure that you understand the codes and that it's a language that your practice understands. And seeing some of these practices, they invest a lot of time in some of the top of the line materials and equipment from a clinical standpoint. but maybe not quite making the same or similar investment into coding resources that genuinely yields a significant return on investment. So please invest in these resources for your office managers to understand of the coding so they know what to bill out and they know how to get every penny that your practice truly deserves. Okay, tip number 3, which is support with consistently sending claims. So reviewing your production and your collection numbers is something that's important to do with the whole team. Like I mentioned earlier, everyone likes to know if they're doing a good job. So knowing these numbers each and every day, where the goals are, it really creates a buy-in, and it holds everybody accountable to the role that they play, not only in your meetings, but also for the practice in your revenue cycle management. So sending claims free of errors starts by making sure that you're submitting claims on the most recent version of the ADA claim form. And that was actually updated in 2019. And I do know there's some softwares that still default to the 2012 version. Now, even if you're sending claims electronically or you're doing by mail, making sure that the correct claim form is selected in your PMS settings is critical. And then we have the fees on your claim. So if you're submitting your PPO fees and you think that it might help minimize the adjustments, you could be missing out on a lot of exponential amount of revenue. So, for example, when a patient has more than one plan, right, coordination of benefits, the secondary may coordinate up to that amount submitted on the claim form. So let's say your UCR for a crown is $1,000. If a patient has dual insurance with both plans pay 50%, if you were to submit your contracted rate of $800, for example, and let's say the Delta fee pays 50% of that, you're missing out on $200 worth of revenue. And we all know how much, crowns that we do a year, and that's a lot of revenue that adds up. Another huge piece, making sure that you're sending your claims out accurately, is making sure that you have the correct provider listed on your claim. So that means the doctor that rendered or supervised treatment is the one that's listed there. So it's not your hygienist's name. If you have an associate that isn't credentialed yet with a patient's plan, and you don't want to put your name on the claim form, the associate's name and NPI go on the claim form, and it will be processed as out of network until they can be credentialed. So if you're a multi-doctor practice or an owner doc thinking of bringing in an associate, just make sure you have everything that needs to be done to get everything credentialed. It's definitely a process, but flying up eAssist if you ever need some help with that. There's also things too, when going through this, when the credentialing piece, it also needs to be updated every 2 years. So that's something to keep in mind about as well. Okay, and then how are we making sure that our claims are submitted cleanly the first time around? We want to make sure that every item that you're sending out has all the required attachments. Does it require period charting? Does it require a pre or post-op PA? Do we need to see the apex? So noting the codes and what each code requires for the claim to process is a huge piece to making sure you're not having a delayed claim. All right, so now we're going to go through sending claims cleanly to ensure that your reimbursements are right to where the patients feel that they are, and that you're giving out accurate treatment planning. So every time the claim is processed, you're not the only ones to receive a copy of that EOB. The patients get one too. And some of these patients, they're waiting for them. So when they get that EOB in the mail and it matches exactly what you worked up on that treatment estimate, the patient starts to build a little bit more trust that you've given them an accurate treatment plan. So they don't like to be taken off guard when their EOB says, hey, I should have overpaid or things like that. And all of a sudden, they get an unexpected bill or things like that, asking for more money, and never feels good. So making sure that you have your accurate treatment plans ready to go for your patients, making sure their claims are submitted timely, so not getting a bill 6 months later, is a huge part in keeping your revenue cycle management process strong. Okay, so let's go through your ideal net collection ratio. So the ideal network collection ratio is actually close to 98%. And to calculate this number, you just want to take your collection ratio, your net collections, and divide that by your net production. So again, the average is 91, but your ideal amount is around 98. Now, I will say a lot of offices, when they see this, they have a question of, hey, I'm seeing a big difference between gross production and net production. And this isn't really a collections issue, it's more of a write-off issue. So that probably needs to be looked at a little bit more closely. But your net production tells you how much you can actually physically collect and put in the bank All right, so let's go through tip number 4. And I touched on this a little bit earlier, but managing your revenue cycle through your insurance and your patient aging reports. So I do want to do a quick poll here. And the question is, how often do you follow up on outstanding insurance claims? So we have a couple of options, once a month, twice a month, or we don't follow up on claims. So I want to give you guys a little less than a minute or so to follow up. The system does take about a minute for it to process. So I'm going to give you guys some peace and quiet for about 45 seconds to go through this and think through it and respond, and we'll go through the results as well. Okay, perfect. So what we have is once a month at 63%, twice a month at 30%, and then we don't follow up on claims at 5%. So that's actually really interesting to know. So how do you know that your claims are being followed up on a timely manner? Well, the proof is in the pudding, or the reporting, I guess, which your case here would be your insurance aging report. So when running this report, making sure that you're filtering by your aging category. So you have account balances less than 30 days old, which should roughly represent around 66% of your total. Then you have the next category, which is 30 to 60 days, and that should fall somewhere between 10 to 25%. And then we have our 60 to 90 day category, which should represent about 5 to 10% of your total. And then accounts that are over 90 categories should never be more than around 5%. Now, ideally, unpaid claims will, once they make it past the 90-day mark, this is where you really want to make sure that they're being worked on a more regular basis, because you don't want to have issues with timely filing and things like that. So really the bigger question is, who in the office is responsible for this, and how frequently are they touching these claims and making sure that it's done? So, creating a system in the office where the entire team understands and recognizes the value in the process of this. If you have a bonus system in place that's based on collections instead of production, the entire team will hold this one person accountable, because it impacts their bonus, which is really important to them. Okay, so the insurance verification is arguably the most important dental step, because nothing else can happen really, without it. So let's go through a couple of tips and tricks here. So coordinating your insurance verification and making sure that this is a huge component in your practice. So it really minimizes the rejections by ensuring that we have accurate information on file before the claim ever goes out the door. So what could constitute as a rejection? The missing or inaccurate information that can't be processed, a denial when a payer receives that, maybe they adjudicated the claim and determined it wasn't payable, but it should have been. And so that's the important piece of when you're working your aging, you start to realize, oh my gosh, I'm having to resend the same thing and maybe not quite understanding why. And it could be cited back to just the policy information that was sent was inaccurate. Even the most seasoned insurance gurus' numbers, sometimes incorrectly, they get distracted or interrupted. They look like they have 8 arms, but I can assure you they only have 2. And sometimes errors occur whenever you're sending out or putting in your insurance information about a patient. So attention to detail and having as much information as you can will save time, energy, and resources, and really prevent your rejections that come through. Once you have your rejections and your denials, it really delays your revenue cycle there. So the top practices in the country know that, tedious tasks should be outsourced, and to streamline revenue, so that way their office manager can grow the practice. They can focus on other ways your revenue cycle management can be healthy and can be managed. So to elevate your dental practice to a really elite status, outsourcing is such a fantastic way for you to collect more, you can manage more, and you can stress less. So on average, like we discussed, the average dental practice has their monthly collection ratio about 91%. Outsourcing, we have our clients around 98.9%. So, we work with several different services to get monthly collections even over 100% when they have bundled services. So, it's a lot of revenue that can be left on the table when you have so much to juggle, and outsourcing can really bring that 9% gap that we see on average here. So, as we highlighted at the beginning of this program, eAssist offers so many solutions, for several reasons, but none more other higher than delivering peace of mind to practices here all over the nation. So if you do like more information here about your eAssist services and how we can support you, we definitely would love to hear from you. So we do have another poll, and as we wait the next minute, to cover a little bit more of what we discussed today is in particular about your insurance aging report. Here at eAssist, we actually follow up on those every 2 weeks. So someone is looking at your aging minimally every 2 weeks, working these claims and giving your revenue cycle a solid, reliable flow. So there's lots of quality aspects with your aging that we can help you with. So we'd love to be able to talk with you and give you some more information about that. But and then, of course, you can always reach out to me directly, and we'll have our information here at the very end. So I'll give it a few more minutes. It takes like a little close to 60 seconds to get this process with the results, and then we'll move over in just a little bit. So I'm going to turn the mic over to our moderator to see if there's any particular questions that we can help answer before we wrap it up. I think I had the 30 minutes, so I was really trying to make sure I didn't go over. I know everyone has lots of things to do in the evening, so is there anything that we can help answer before we wrap it up?
Thank you again, Courtney. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We did record tonight's webinar, and we'll email the recording out sometime next week. We would appreciate everyone's feedback via our survey, which will pop up on your screen shortly. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Courtney, and we look forward to seeing you on future webinars.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.